Yonsu stood at the window of Earth's newest space station and watched the stars. She never got tired of looking at them. 3 months ago, nobody on Earth knew that other people lived among those stars. Now she was getting ready to meet them. The message had come from something called the Galactic Confederation. It was written in perfect English, which was strange enough. But the words inside made it even stranger. Greetings, people of Earth. You have reached the stars. Now you must prove you deserve to stay here. Send your best people to take the sacred trial. Only those who pass can join us. Yonsu read that message 50 times. She was a commander in the Terran Exploratory Corps, which was a fancy name for Earth's new space navy. Before aliens contacted them, her job was exploring the solar system and looking for problems. Now her job was much bigger. Captain Hyun-woo walked into the room. He was her boss and the smartest person she knew. He looked worried, which made Yeon-su worry too. Hyun-woo never looked worried about anything. They sent more information, he said. He handed her a data pad. Read this. You're not going to like it. The new message explained the sacred trial. Every species in the galaxy had to take this test before they could get advanced technology. The test happened on a place called Nightmare Station. It was an old, broken space station that orbited a dying star. The message said that candidates had to survive 7 days on the station. They had to complete 3 trials. They had to stay sane. Most importantly, they had to do all of this while the station tried to kill them. 70 to 80% of candidates die, Yeon-su read out loud. The survivors often come back changed. Some never speak again. Hyun-woo nodded. That's not the worst part. Keep reading. Yeon-su found the part that made Hyun-woo look sick. The Galactic Confederation had been running this test for 12,000 years. Hundreds of species had taken it. Some passed and joined the galaxy's community. Others failed and stayed alone on their home worlds. But no species like humans had ever taken the test before. Deathworld species, Yeon-su said slowly. That's what they call us. Most planets where life grows are safe places, Hyun-woo explained. Stable weather, friendly animals, not much danger. Earth is different. Earth tries to kill everything that lives on it. Earthquakes, storms, floods, ice ages, volcanoes, animals that eat other animals, diseases, poisonous plants. Yeon-su thought about that. She had lived through 3 major earthquakes, 2 hurricanes, and a winter so cold that her city ran out of heating fuel. Her grandfather survived a war. Her great-grandmother survived a plague. Every human alive had ancestors who survived something terrible. They don't know what Earth made us, Hyun-woo continued. They've never met a species that grew up fighting for survival every day. They're scared of us, but they're also curious. They want to see what happens when a Deathworld species takes their test. The thought excited and terrified Yeon-su at the same time. She was good at her job because she stayed calm when things went wrong. Things went wrong a lot in space. But this was different. This was representing all of humanity. Who else is going? She asked. You get to pick your team. 3 other people. The Confederation says most species send their strongest warriors or their smartest scientists. But I think we need something different. Over the next week, Yeon-su interviewed dozens of people. She talked to soldiers who had fought in wars. She talked to scientists who had discovered new technologies. She talked to engineers who had built the first interstellar ships. But in the end, she chose people for different reasons. Taemin was an engineer, but not just any engineer. He was the kind of person who could fix anything with whatever parts he could find. During the Mars colony crisis, he had kept life support running for 6 months using spare parts from a coffee machine and some old computer cables. He also told jokes when things got scary, which Yan-Su thought might be important. So Young was a medic who had worked in disaster zones all over Earth. She had treated earthquake victims in collapsed buildings and flood survivors in refugee camps. She knew how to save lives when everything was falling apart. More importantly, she stayed kind even when surrounded by suffering. Jae-ho was a tactical specialist, which meant he was very good at fighting. But he was also good at thinking about fighting. He could look at any situation and figure out how to survive it. During the asteroid mining riots, he had protected 3 stations full of civilians using only 6 security guards and some clever thinking. The 4 of them spent 2 weeks training together. They learned how the station's systems worked, at least the parts that still worked. They practiced fighting the kinds of robots they might find there. They studied the psychological profiles of species that had taken the test before, but mostly they just got to know each other. "Why did you volunteer for this?" So Young asked during one of their training breaks. "Someone has to go," Taemin said. "Might as well be us." "That's not a real answer," Jae-ho pointed out. Taemin thought for a moment. "My grandmother used to tell stories about the old country. She said her village had a saying, 'When the mountain falls, everyone lifts together.' I think humanity is about to meet a very big mountain." Yeon-su understood what he meant. The galaxy was full of species that had passed this test. They had technologies that could help Earth solve problems like hunger and disease, but they also had weapons that could destroy Earth completely. Humanity needed friends among the stars, not enemies. The day before they left, Hyunwoo took Yeon-su aside for one last conversation. "I've been reading more about the other species," he said. "The Vielthans are elegant and sophisticated. They value art and beauty above everything else. The Korthaks are a hive mind. They share thoughts across their entire species. The Luminari are made of pure energy. They've never had physical bodies." "What's your point?" Yeon-su asked. "They all evolved on safe worlds. They never had to worry about predators or natural disasters. They never had to fight wars over resources. They don't understand what it means to struggle for survival." Yeon-su nodded. She was starting to see where this was going. When they take the test, they're facing something completely new. For us, Nightmare Station sounds like Tuesday. That made Yeon-su laugh, which she hadn't expected. But Hyunwoo was right. She had read the descriptions of what made the station so dangerous. Gravity that changed without warning, poisonous air, broken systems that could explode at any time, hostile robots that hunted anything that moved. It sounded like growing up on Earth just with better technology. The transport ship arrived the next morning. It was built by aliens and looked nothing like human ships. It was smooth and curved where human ships were angular and practical. It hummed with power that Yeon-su couldn't understand. The pilot was a Vielthan named Kayla. She was tall and graceful with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything. She spoke English well, but with a musical accent that made every word sound like part of a song. "You are the humans," she said. It wasn't a question. "We are," Yeon-su confirmed. "I have never seen a Deathworld species before. You look—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Sturdy." Taemin grinned. "Thanks. We work out." The journey to Nightmare Station took 3 days. During that time, Kayla told them about the other species taking the test. There would be representatives from 7 different civilizations, including humanity. Most were sending teams of 5 or 6 people. Some were bringing support equipment and advanced technology. "What are you bringing?" Kayla asked. Yansu looked at their supplies. Basic tools, simple weapons, standard rations, medical supplies, and some spare clothes. Everything fit in 4 backpacks. "Just ourselves," she said. Kayla looked confused. "But the station is very dangerous. How will you survive without proper equipment?" "We'll figure it out," Jae-ho said simply. As they approached Nightmare Station, Yeonsu got her first look at what they would call home for the next week. The station was huge and obviously old. Parts of it were dark, where power had failed. Other parts glowed with dangerous radiation. It tumbled slowly through space like a broken toy. "Beautiful," Tae-min said cheerfully. "It's like a puzzle that wants to kill you." The other passengers on the transport looked at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was. Maybe they all were. But as Yeonsu watched the dying station grow larger in the view screen, she felt something she hadn't expected. She felt excited. The docking bay of Nightmare Station smelled like burnt metal and old death. Yeonsu wrinkled her nose as she stepped off the transport. The air was thick and tasted wrong, like breathing through a dirty filter. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows that moved when nobody was walking. She looked around at the other candidates who had arrived. The differences were striking. The Velton team had brought a mobile habitat pod that hummed with clean air recyclers and gravity generators. Their leader, a tall male named Vorthel, wore armor that sparkled with energy shields. His team moved in perfect formation, their equipment floating behind them in anti-grav carriers. The Korthax delegation was stranger. They looked like insects, crossed with machines, but moved together as if controlled by one mind, which, according to the briefings, they were. Their leader spoke for all of them, but Yeonsu could see the others moving their mouths at the same time, sharing the same thoughts and words. The Luminari didn't have bodies at all. They appeared as floating lights contained in special energy suits that let them interact with physical objects. Their containers glowed with soft colors that shifted like thoughts made visible. 3 other species had sent representatives, each with their own advanced technology and careful preparations. Watching them set up their equipment, Yeonsu felt like she was at a technology expo where everyone else had gotten the dress code memo except her team. The humans stood in the docking bay wearing simple spacesuits and carrying backpacks. Taemin was already examining a broken ventilation grate with the interest of someone looking at an interesting puzzle. So Young had pulled out a small scanner and was testing the air quality. Jae-ho was noting the positions of exits and potential defensive points. "You came prepared differently than the others," observed a voice behind them. They turned to see a tall, thin being that looked almost human except for the extra arms and the skin that changed color like a mood ring. This was Zeph, the representative from the Kalari Collective. "We brought what we thought we'd need," Yeonsu replied. "And what did you think you would need?" "Each other," Taemin answered without looking up from the broken grate. "Oh, and this place has a serious maintenance problem. Half these systems are held together with hope and prayer." Zeph's skin shifted to a confused purple color. "You find this amusing?" "Not amusing," Jae-ho corrected. "Familiar." Before Zeph could ask what that meant, a sound echoed through the station. It wasn't quite music and wasn't quite noise, but something that made everyone's bones vibrate. The lights dimmed, then brightened, then started flashing in a pattern that hurt to look at. A voice spoke from speakers hidden in the walls. It was artificial, obviously a computer. but it sounded old and tired. "Welcome to Nightmare Station. I am the Overseer. You have 7 days to complete 3 trials. You must survive the environment. You must maintain your sanity. You must prove your species is worthy of joining the galactic community." The Overseer paused. When it spoke again, there was something that might have been amusement in its electronic voice. "Resources are limited. Alliances are permitted but temporary. The station's systems will challenge you in ways your species has never experienced. Many of you will not survive. Some who survive will wish they had not." Another pause. The light stopped flashing and settled into a dim, sickly yellow glow. "The trial begins now. Good luck." Immediately, the other species began implementing their survival plans. The Veilthans activated force fields around their habitat pod. The Korthax spread out to establish a communication network. The Luminari began analyzing the station's power grid. The humans looked at each other and shrugged. "Well," Yonsu said, "this beats basic training. Barely." "Where do you want to set up base camp?" Jeho asked. "Somewhere with good bones," Taemin replied, still examining the broken machinery. "This whole section is falling apart, but I think I saw a cafeteria back that way. Structural support looked solid, multiple exits, and if we're lucky, maybe some vending machines to scavenge parts from." So Young held up her scanner. "Air quality is marginal but breathable if we're careful. Radiation levels are elevated, but not immediately fatal. Water sources are contaminated but filterable." "Sounds like home," Jeho commented. They made their way through corridors that groaned and shifted around them. Gravity fluctuated without warning, making walking an adventure. Sometimes they weighed normal. Sometimes they felt light as feathers. Sometimes they had to grab handholds to keep from being pressed against the ceiling. The other candidates had clearly not expected this. Yonsu could hear frustrated voices, echoing from other parts of the station as equipment malfunctioned and carefully laid plans fell apart. The cafeteria Taemin had spotted was a disaster. Tables and chairs were scattered everywhere, some bolted to what used to be the floor, others floating free in areas where gravity had failed completely. The walls were covered in some kind of corrosive slime that ate through metal. Most of the ceiling had collapsed. "Perfect," Taemin announced cheerfully. "Are you seeing the same room we are?" So Young asked. "I'm seeing raw materials," Taemin replied. He pointed to different areas as he spoke. "Those table frames are good metal. The collapsed ceiling gives us building supplies. That slime is probably acidic, which means we can use it for chemical processes if we're careful. And look." He walked over to what had been the serving area. Behind the counter, several vending machines lay on their sides. They were old and damaged, but their cases were intact. Water recyclers, power cells, computer circuits, and if we're really lucky, some snacks that haven't gone bad yet. Jeho was examining the room from a defensive perspective. Good sight lines, multiple exits. That collapsed ceiling creates natural choke points if something nasty comes looking for us. We could fortify this place. So Young was taking readings with her medical equipment. Slime isn't immediately toxic to humans, just corrosive. Air circulation is better here than in the corridors. We could make this work. Then let's get to work, Yonsu decided. What happened next would have looked like chaos to any outside observer, but to the 4 humans, it was just another day. Ending in why Taemin began dismantling the vending machines with the enthusiasm of a child opening presents. Each component he removed was examined, tested, and either kept for later use or discarded. Within an hour, he had the basic components for a water filtration system laid out on a cleared table. So-Young set up a medical station in the corner that had the most stable gravity. She tested everything for toxicity and contamination, creating a safe zone where they could eat and rest without environmental suits. She also began collecting samples of the various substances they encountered, building a database of what was dangerous and what might be useful. Jeho mapped the entire area, noting structural weak points, defensive positions, and escape routes. He also started collecting improvised weapons from the debris. A broken table leg made a good club. Sharp pieces of metal could be spears. Everything was evaluated for its potential to keep them alive. Yeonsu coordinated their efforts and started thinking about long-term strategy. The trials would come eventually, but first they had to survive the station itself. That meant food, water, shelter, and security. As they worked, other candidates passed by their section. Some stopped to watch with curiosity or confusion. Vorthel, the Vielthan leader, paused at the entrance to their makeshift base. His team was still struggling to keep their habitat pod stable as gravity shifts played havoc with their technology. "You have chosen to remain in this damaged section," he observed. "We chose to fix this damaged section," Yeonsu corrected. "But surely you could find somewhere safer." Taemin looked up from where he was connecting water recycling tubes. "Safer is boring. Besides, all the safe places are probably taken by now." "You are not concerned about the environmental hazards?" "What hazards?" So-Young asked genuinely. "The air is breathable. The radiation won't kill us this week, and the gravity is just wonky, not dangerous. This is better than the mining stations back home." Vorthel's expression suggested that mining stations back home sounded horrifying. By the end of the first day, the humans had transformed the ruined cafeteria into a functional base camp. They had running water, clean air, stable lighting, and comfortable sleeping areas. They had also established friendly relations with several other candidates by sharing their filtered water and offering medical assistance. As they settled in for their first night, Taemin was still tinkering with salvaged electronics. "You know, what's funny?" he said. "What?" Yeonsu asked. "The other species keep talking about how dangerous this place is, but nobody's actually tried to hurt us yet. It's just a broken space station. We've seen broken space stations before." "Maybe the real test isn't surviving the station," So-Young mused. "Maybe it's seeing how you react when you think you're in danger." Jeho nodded. "Earth taught us the difference between actual danger and just uncomfortable circumstances. This place is uncomfortable, but it's not trying to eat us." As if summoned by his words, something howled in the distance. It was a sound like metal tearing mixed with an animal in pain. The lights flickered, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. "Okay," Jeho amended. "Now it's trying to eat us." But instead of panic, Yeonsu heard something unexpected from her team. Quiet laughter. Finally, the second day brought new challenges and new revelations about their fellow candidates. Yeonsu woke up to the sound of Taemin humming while he worked on something that looked like a coffee machine crossed with a space heater. The smell of actual food drifted through their base camp, which seemed impossible given their limited supplies. "Please tell me you didn't cook the emergency rations," she said. "Better," Taemin replied happily. "I found a hydroponics bay that was mostly working. The plants were dead, but the nutrient systems were still functional. Mix that with some protein paste from the medical supplies, add some flavoring from the vending machines, and we have actual breakfast." The food was surprisingly good. While they ate, So-Young gave them a status report on the other candidates. "The Luminary lost 2 team members overnight," she reported. The radiation interfered with their energy matrices. They're stable now, but they're scared. The Korthaks are having problems too. 3 of their drones went offline, and apparently that feels like having parts of your brain shut down. What about the Veilthans? Jeho asked, still holed up in their habitat pod. Their leader, Vorthel, came by earlier asking if we had any spare power cells. Theirs are draining faster than expected. Yansu frowned. We should help them if we can. Already on it, Taemin said. I rigged up some backup power from the vending machine batteries. Nothing fancy, but it should keep their life support running. That was typical of her team, Yansu thought. Even in a survival situation, their first instinct was to help others. She wondered if that was a human trait or just something special about the people she'd chosen. They were interrupted by a sound that made everyone freeze. It was the howling they had heard the night before, but closer now. Much closer. Contact, Jeho said quietly, pointing toward the main entrance. Something moved in the shadows of the corridor. It was hard to see clearly, but it looked wrong. Too many angles, too many teeth moving in ways that hurt to watch. Security construct, So-Young identified, checking her scanner. Artificial intelligence, but designed to hunt living things. Probably left over from when this station was operational. The thing stepped into the light, and Yeonsu got her first clear look at it. It had been a maintenance robot once, she could tell, but someone had modified it for killing. Sharp blades replaced its work tools. Its optical sensors had been replaced. With targeting systems, it moved with predatory grace that no maintenance robot should possess. Well, Taemin said conversationally, that's new. The construct detected their voices and turned toward them. Its targeting systems lit up as it identified them as threats. It opened its mouth like speaker and let out that terrible howling sound. Then it charged. What happened next would become legendary among the other candidates, though none of them saw it happen. They only heard the sounds echoing through the station. Corridors. There was the mechanical screaming of the construct, the sound of metal hitting metal, some creative human cursing, and then something that sounded like laughter. When it was over, the construct lay in pieces across the cafeteria floor. The humans were already stripping it for useful parts. Good reflexes on this one, Taemin commented, examining the targeting system. We can use these sensors for early warning systems. Combat. Programming is interesting too, Jeho added, looking at the AI core. Whoever modified these really knew what they were doing. Medical sensors are intact, So-Young reported. I can integrate these into our health monitoring systems. Yeonsu looked at her team, then at the destroyed robot, then back at her team. Anyone want to explain how that was so easy? Pack tactics, Jeho said simply. It was designed to hunt individuals, not coordinated groups. Also, it was loud and obvious, Taemin added. Earth predators are sneaky. This thing just announced its presence and charged in a straight line. Plus, we've all dealt with malfunctioning robots before, So-Young finished. You learn where the weak points are. As they worked to clean up and salvage useful materials, other candidates began arriving to investigate the noise. The sight of 4 humans casually dismantling a killer robot while having a conversation about lunch plans seemed to confuse everyone. How did you defeat it? Asked Kree, one of the remaining Luminari. Teamwork, Yeonsu replied. But it was designed to kill. The Overseers created these constructs to test our combat abilities. Then we passed, Jeho said matter-of-factly. Word of the construct's defeat spread quickly through the station. By midday, a steady stream of aliens was visiting the human base camp. Some came out of curiosity, others seeking help or advice. The Velthans were struggling with their equipment failures. The Korthax couldn't handle the isolation when their communication links went down. The Luminari were barely stable in the hostile environment. Other species had their own problems. But the humans seemed to be thriving. "I don't understand," Vorthel confessed as Timon helped repair his habitat pod's power systems. "This place is a nightmare. How are you not afraid?" "Oh, we're afraid," Yonsu assured him. "We're just used to being afraid." "That makes no sense." So Young looked up from where she was treating a Korthax drone's radiation burns. "What scares you most?" she asked. Vorthel considered the question. "Chaos, disorder, the breakdown of civilization and beauty." "What about you?" Yonsu asked Kree. "Dissolution. Losing coherence, being scattered across space with no way to reform." The Korthax representatives spoke for their collective. "Isolation. Being cut off from the unity of thought that makes us who we are." "Those are all reasonable fears," So Young said gently. "But they're fears of losing something you've always had. We're afraid of different things." "Like what?" Vorthel asked. "Failure," Jeho said. "Letting down the people who depend on us." "Waste," Taemin added. "Having resources and not using them to help." "Suffering we could have prevented," So Young contributed. "Not being good enough when it matters," Yonsu finished. The aliens looked confused. "But those are not environmental fears," Kree observed. "No," Yonsu agreed. "They're not. Environmental dangers are just problems to solve. It's the social failures that keep us awake at night." That afternoon, the station announced the first formal trial. Candidates were called to gather in what had once been the main recreation area. The space was huge, with multiple levels connected by walkways and platforms. Most of the lights were broken, leaving pools of harsh illumination separated by deep shadows. The overseer's voice echoed from hidden speakers. "The first trial tests your ability to survive direct conflict. Combat constructs have been activated throughout this area. Your goal is simple: survive for 1 hour. Eliminating the constructs is optional. Hiding is permitted. Cooperation is allowed." As the overseer spoke, red lights began blinking throughout the recreation area. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "The trial begins now." The first constructs appeared immediately. They were different from the one the humans had fought earlier. These were smaller, faster, designed for pack hunting. Their optical sensors swept the area like searchlights, looking for targets. The other species immediately began implementing their survival strategies. The Velthans activated personal shields and retreated to defensible positions. The Korthax tried to coordinate through their mental links, but the interference in the area was too strong. The Luminari dimmed their energy signatures and attempted to hide. The humans did something different. They walked out into the middle of the recreation area and started making noise. "Hey! Ugly!" Taemin called out to the nearest construct. "Your mother was a toaster." The constructs immediately zeroed in on them. Within seconds, the humans were surrounded by a growing circle of killer robots, all focused on this one group that seemed determined to make itself the center of attention. "Are they insane?" Vorthel whispered from his hiding spot. "I think they have a plan," Kree replied, though she didn't sound convinced. The plan, such as it was, became clear quickly. The humans weren't trying to fight all the constructs. They were hurting them, using coordinated movement and a lot of Creative shouting, they drew most of the killer robots into the center of the recreation area. Then they began a fighting retreat toward one of the larger platforms, leading the constructs into a bottleneck. What followed was not the elegant combat the other species had expected. It was brutal, practical, and effective. The humans used the environment against their enemies, toppling structures to crush constructs, using broken cables as whips, turning debris into projectiles. But most importantly, they never fought alone. When one human was in trouble, the others immediately moved to help. When someone needed a weapon, it appeared in their hands. When someone needed cover, it was provided. They fought like a single organism with 4 bodies. Fascinating, the overseer commented, its voice carrying to every corner of the recreation area. Most species attempt to minimize conflict. These creatures are maximizing it while minimizing risk. Within 30 minutes, the recreation area was quiet, except for the sounds of humans salvaging useful parts from destroyed constructs. "Well," Taman said cheerfully, "that was fun. Anyone else hungry?" The other candidates stared at them from their hiding places. The trial was supposed to last an hour. The humans had ended it in half that time, not by surviving the constructs, but by systematically destroying every single one. "How?" Forthel asked. Day 4 arrived with ominous silence. The usual mechanical groaning of the station had stopped, replaced by a quiet that made everyone nervous. Even the emergency lighting seemed dimmer, casting longer shadows that moved in ways shadows shouldn't. "Move!" Yonsu found her team gathered around their makeshift breakfast table, but nobody was eating. They all looked tense in a way she hadn't seen since they arrived. "Something's wrong," So Young said quietly. "My medical scanners are picking up strange readings from all over the station. Brain activity patterns, but not from any living species we've encountered." "The other candidates are acting weird, too," Jeho reported. "Vorthel hasn't left his habitat pod since yesterday. The Korthax collective is quiet. Too quiet. And I haven't seen any of the Luminary since last night." Tamin looked up from a device he was building. "Station's computer systems are doing something new. Massive power draws from sections we thought were dead. It's like the whole place is waking up." Before Yonsu could respond, the overseer's voice echoed through the station, but it sounded different now. Less mechanical, more interested. "Attention. Candidates. The second trial will now begin. This trial tests your psychological stability and your ability to maintain sanity under extreme stress. You will each face your species' deepest fears in virtual reality designed to break minds." The voice paused, and when it continued, there was definitely something like amusement in its tone. "Previous candidates have found this trial challenging. Prepare yourselves." Throughout the station, screens began activating. They showed glimpses of the other candidates as they were selected for their trials. The humans watched from their base camp as their fellow test-takers were led to special chambers filled with strange technology. The first to go was a Valthon named Sil-An. On the screen, they could see her placed in a chair surrounded by devices that projected images directly into her brain. What followed was horrifying to watch. Sil-An's trial showed her a universe where all beauty had died. Art crumbled to dust, music became noise, and everything elegant and refined was consumed by chaos. The humans watched her scream and struggle as her deepest values were destroyed before her eyes. She lasted 12 minutes before collapsing. When the trial ended, she was conscious but staring at nothing, tears streaming down her face. "That's horrible," So Young whispered. The Korthax trial was different, but equally brutal. The drone called Hex 9 was shown complete isolation from the collective mind. For a species that shared every thought and feeling, being truly alone was the ultimate terror. They watched as the drone thrashed in panic, trying to reconnect, with minds that were no longer there. Hex 9 lasted 8 minutes. The luminary candidate, Kree, faced dissolution. Her energy form was scattered across space, unable to hold together, slowly fading into background radiation. The pure terror on her face as she felt herself disappearing was painful to watch. She lasted 15 minutes, but only because her species was naturally more resilient to mental trauma. They're testing species-specific fears, Yonsu realized. Things that would terrify us based on how we evolved and what we value most. What do you think they'll show us? Taemin asked. Before anyone could answer, the Overseer's voice returned. Human candidates, report to Trial Chamber 4. The walk to the chamber felt longer than it should have. The humans passed other candidates who had already been through their trials. Most sat in shocked silence. Some rocked back and forth, muttering to themselves. A few just stared at the walls with empty eyes. This is what breaks minds, Jae-ho observed quietly. Not physical danger. Psychological torture specifically designed for your species. Trial Chamber 4 was identical to the others they had seen. Chairs surrounded by projection equipment, monitoring devices, and what looked like medical support systems for candidates who couldn't handle the stress. Who goes first? Yonsu asked. I will, Taemin volunteered. Might as well get this over with. He settled into the chair while the others watched the screens. The projection equipment hummed to life, and suddenly they could see what Taemin was experiencing. The scenario was brutal in its simplicity. Taemin was an engineer on a space station filled with people he cared about. Systems were failing everywhere. Life support, artificial gravity, power generation, everything was breaking down at once. He had the knowledge to fix any one system, but not enough time to fix them all. People were dying while he tried to decide what to save first. The other humans watched their teammate experience his worst nightmare. Not personal death or pain, but the inability to help when help was desperately needed. Being forced to choose who lived and who died because he wasn't good enough to save everyone. But then something unexpected happened. Taemin stopped panicking and started working. Okay, he said to himself in the simulation. Priority triage. Life support first. That buys time. Gravity can wait. People can handle floating for a while. Power grid needs to be stabilized. He began moving through the virtual station with practiced efficiency, not trying to save everyone at once, but creating a sequence of repairs that would maximize survival. When he couldn't fix something completely, he jury-rigged temporary solutions. When he ran out of proper materials, he improvised with whatever was available. He's problem-solving, So Young realized. He's turning the nightmare into an engineering challenge. The scenario kept throwing new problems at him. Fire broke out in the medical bay. The reactor started overloading. Hull breaches appeared in multiple sections. Each crisis was designed to overwhelm him with the impossibility of saving everyone. But Taemin just kept working. He couldn't save everyone, so he focused on saving as many as he could. When the simulation showed him people dying despite his efforts, he acknowledged the loss and kept going. I'm sorry, he said to each virtual casualty. I'll do better next. Time. After 37 minutes, the simulation ended. Taemin had saved 68% of the people on the station. In previous trials, that would have been considered a failure. The scenario was designed to be impossible, to break minds with the weight of inevitable failure. Instead, Taemin opened his eyes and asked, How'd I do? Can we run it again? I think I can get the life support stabilized faster if I reroute power from the recreational areas first. The monitoring equipment showed readings the Overseer had never seen before. Where other candidates showed elevated stress, psychological breakdown, and trauma responses, Taemin's readings showed focus, determination, and what could only be described as professional interest. So Young went next. Her scenario was a plague spreading through a refugee camp. Thousands of people were infected with a disease she couldn't cure, couldn't stop, could barely treat. She had limited medical supplies and no way to get more. The simulation expected her to break under the weight of watching people die from something she should have been able to prevent. Instead, she immediately began triage protocols. She set up quarantine zones, organized the healthy refugees to help care for the sick, and started working on treatments with whatever materials she could find. When people died, she grieved for exactly 30 seconds, then went back to work. Every person I save is a victory, she explained to the simulation. I can't let the people I can't help stop me from helping the people I can. She lasted 42 minutes and managed to slow the plague's spread by 60% while developing 3 potential treatments from scavenged materials. Jae-ho's trial put him in command of a military unit defending civilians from an overwhelming enemy force. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting a battle he couldn't win. The scenario was designed to break him with the futility of sacrifice and the horror of sending people to die in a hopeless cause. But Jae-ho had trained for exactly this scenario his entire career. He organized fighting retreats, used the terrain to his advantage, and turned every defeat into a delay that let more civilians escape. When his soldiers died, he honored their sacrifice by making sure it meant something. Good. People doing their duty, he said each time someone fell. I won't waste what you gave us. He held the line for 51 minutes, evacuating 83% of the civilians before the simulation ended. Finally, it was Yeon-su's turn. Her scenario was the worst one yet. She was in command of Earth's space fleet, and humanity was losing a war against alien invaders. Her home planet was under siege. Her people were dying, and every decision she made led to more destruction. The simulation expected her to break under the responsibility of an entire species' survival. Instead, she did what she had trained her entire life to do. She commanded. When Earth's defenses fell, she organized evacuation fleets. When the evacuations were overwhelmed, she coordinated refugee camps on other worlds. When those camps were attacked, she built new ones. Each defeat became the foundation for the next attempt to save human lives. We bend, but we don't break, she told her virtual crew. As long as one human lives, humanity survives. As long as humanity survives, we can rebuild. The scenario threw everything at her. The destruction of Earth, the scattering of the human race, the seeming extinction of her species. But Yeon-su just kept working, kept planning, kept leading. She couldn't save Earth, so she focused on saving as many humans as possible. She couldn't win the war, so she focused on making sure humanity would survive. The final day arrived with chaos. Yeon-su woke to the sound of alarms blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights strobed in patterns that meant immediate evacuation. The deck under her feet vibrated with the deep, terrible rhythm of structural failure. Station's coming apart, Jae-ho reported, checking his instruments. We've got maybe 6 hours before critical systems fail completely. Through the windows, they could see their situation clearly. Nightmare Station was falling toward the dying star it orbited. Whatever had kept it stable for thousands of years was finally breaking down. The hull glowed red in places where it was already beginning to heat up from increased radiation. "This has to be the final trial," So Young said, helping pack their essential supplies. "The ultimate test." Before anyone could respond, the overseer's voice echoed through the station. It sounded different now, less artificial, more alive somehow. "Attention. Remaining candidates. The final trial has begun. A rescue ship is approaching with limited capacity. There are currently 17 survivors aboard this station. The rescue ship can safely evacuate 9 individuals. The implications hit everyone at once. Nearly half of them would die. You must choose who lives and who dies. This is the final test of worthiness. Do you preserve the strong and sacrifice the weak? Do you save your own species first? How do you decide who deserves to survive?" Through the station's communication system, they could hear other candidates reacting to the news. Some immediately began calculating optimal survival strategies. Others started negotiating for seats on the rescue ship. A few began claiming superior right to survival based on species hierarchy. The humans looked at each other with grim determination. "Everyone goes home or no one does," Yansu said firmly. "That's not possible," Taemin pointed out. "The overseer said the ship can only take 9 people." "Then we make it possible," Jae-ho replied. "How?" So Young asked. Yansu was already moving toward their equipment. "We change the rules, like we've been doing all week." What followed was the most intense planning session of their lives. They had 6 hours to save 17 people using a rescue ship designed for 9. The solution would require everything they had learned about the station, every piece of salvaged equipment they had collected, and every skill they possessed. But most importantly, it would require convincing 16 terrified aliens to trust them with their lives. The humans split up to gather information and resources. Taemin went to analyze the station's structural integrity and remaining power systems. So Young checked on the medical status of all survivors and gathered critical life support equipment. Jae-ho mapped escape routes and calculated timing for a coordinated evacuation. Yeon-su went to talk to the other candidates. She found them scattered throughout the station in various states of panic and desperation. The Vielthons were huddled in their habitat pod, trying to maintain dignity while clearly terrified. The remaining Korthax drones were silent, cut off from their collective and facing death alone. The Luminari flickered weakly, their energy forms barely stable. "We have a plan," Yeon-su announced to the group. "What kind of plan?" asked Vorthel suspiciously. "The mathematics are simple. 9 seats, 17 people. 8 must die." "Nobody has to die," Yeon-su replied. "But we need everyone to work together." "That's impossible," said Zeph, his skin shifting to frustrated red. "The rescue ship cannot hold 17 people. It would exceed life support capacity, structural limits, safety margins." "You're right," Yeon-su agreed. "It can't hold 17 people for a normal rescue. But this isn't a normal rescue." She explained their plan. It was crazy, dangerous, and required precise coordination. It also demanded that everyone trust the humans completely, which seemed unlikely given that they had only known each other for 6 days. "You want us to evacuate in shifts," Vorthel summarized, "using the rescue ship to ferry people to a safe distance, then return for more. But the station is falling into the star. There won't be time for multiple trips." "There will be if we buy more time," Taemin said, arriving with an armload of salvaged equipment. "I can rig the station's engines to fire one more time. Give us maybe 2 hours of stable orbit. The engines haven't worked in decades, Cree pointed out. They will when I'm done with them, Taemin replied with confidence that should have been impossible under the circumstances. And if you're wrong, asked one of the other aliens, if the plan fails, then we all die together instead of some of us dying alone, So Young answered simply. The alien candidates looked at each other, then at the humans. These Deathworlders were asking them to risk certain death for the chance that everyone might live. It went against every survival instinct their species had evolved. But they had watched the humans all week. They had seen them turn disaster into opportunity, fear into determination, impossible choices into creative solutions. What do you need us to do? Vorthel asked quietly. The next 5 hours were a coordinated dance of desperate engineering and careful logistics. Taemin worked with 3 Korthax drones to repair the station's engines using parts salvaged from throughout the facility. The drone's technical knowledge combined with his practical skills produced miracles of improvised engineering. Systems that had been dead for centuries began humming with power. So Young coordinated medical support with Cree and a Kalari medic, named Thex. They prepared portable life support systems for candidates who couldn't survive in the rescue ship's standard atmosphere. They also stockpiled medical supplies for treating radiation exposure and decompression injuries. Jeho worked with Vorthel and Zeph to organize the evacuation sequence. Who would go first? Who would stay until the end? How to maximize the rescue? Ship's capacity for each trip. It required balancing individual needs against group survival, which led to some difficult conversations. I should go last, Vorthel announced. My species values honor above survival. It would be fitting. Honor doesn't keep you alive, Jeho replied. You go in the second group with the other walking wounded. First group is the most critical medical cases. Last group is people who can keep the station running until the final pickup. Yeonsu spent her time coordinating everything and maintaining communication with the incoming rescue ship. The pilot was a professional from the Galactic Confederation, experienced with difficult extractions, but he had never attempted anything like what the humans were proposing. This is insane, Captain Relthor told her over the communication link. My ship is rated for 9 passengers maximum. You're asking me to overload systems, exceed safety margins, and make multiple runs into a deteriorating situation. Yes, Yeonsu agreed. Can you do it? There was a long pause. I've been watching your trial results. You people have a reputation for impossible solutions. If you think this will work, we think it's our best chance to save everyone. Then, I'm willing to try. But if this goes wrong, we all die. If we don't try, 8 of us die anyway. I prefer our odds. The first evacuation group departed with 20 minutes to spare before the station's orbit completely decayed. 4 passengers, all critical medical cases who needed immediate treatment. The rescue ship was crowded but functional. Taemin fired. The repaired engines just as the ship cleared the station's docking bay. The massive structure groaned and shuddered, but it held together. The orbit stabilized, buying them the time they needed. The second group left 40 minutes later. 5 passengers this time, including Vorthel and 2 of the Korthax drones. The ship was definitely overloaded now, but the pilot managed to keep everyone alive during the trip to the safe zone. As the rescue ship turned for its final approach, only 8 people remained on the station, the 4 humans and 4 volunteers who had insisted on staying until the end. Engines are failing, Taemin reported. This orbit won't hold much longer. How much time do we have? Yeonsu asked. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe less. The final docking was a nightmare of twisted metal and failing systems. The station was coming apart around them as they made their way to the docking bay. Hull breaches were opening everywhere, venting atmosphere into space. The artificial gravity failed completely, leaving everyone floating in zero-G while trying to navigate through. Debris Cree, one of the volunteers who had stayed behind, was struck by a piece of flying metal. Her energy matrix destabilized, threatening to disperse completely. "Go ahead," So-Young told the others. "I need to stabilize her before we can move." "We don't leave people behind," Jae-ho said firmly. "Then help me get her to the ship." They made it to the docking bay with minutes to spare. The rescue ship was so overloaded that passengers were literally stacked on top of each other. Life support systems screamed warnings about carbon dioxide buildup and oxygen depletion. "This is going to be close," Captain Relthor warned as they undocked from the dying station. Behind them, Nightmare Station finally succumbed to the gravitational pull of the dying star. The ancient structure broke apart in a shower of metal, and Sparks, its 12,000-year mission finally coming to an end. The rescue ship limped toward the safe zone with all 17 survivors aboard. "How?" Captain Relthor asked when they were finally safe. "The math said this was impossible." "Math assumes you're following the rules," Tae-min replied weakly. He was exhausted but grinning. "We don't follow rules that get people killed." "You could." 3 months later, Yansu stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber at the heart of Confederation space. The room was vast and filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Each species had their own section, their own atmosphere, their own way of existing in the shared space. The humans had been given seats in what used to be called the Observer section for species that had failed the sacred trial. But their chairs had been moved to the center of the chamber where they could address the entire council directly. "The sacred trial has been a cornerstone of galactic civilization for 12,000 years, announced Counselor Prime Vex Lana, the ancient Vielthon who served as the council's leader. "It has determined which species deserve advanced technology, full membership, and the rights that come with joining our community." The chamber was completely silent. Every eye, optical sensor, and consciousness field was focused on the small group of humans sitting calmly in the center of the room. "But the humans have shown us something we never expected to see," Vexlana continued. "They have shown us that our test was flawed." A murmur ran through the chamber. The idea that the sacred trial might be imperfect was revolutionary. Some species had built their entire identities around having passed it successfully. The Overseer will now present its findings, Vexlana announced. The ancient AI that had run Nightmare Station for millennia materialized as a hologram in the center of the chamber. It looked like a shifting geometric pattern that somehow conveyed intelligence and age. "In 12,000 years, I have tested 847 species," the Overseer began. "The trial was designed to identify individuals worthy of survival and advancement. It measured physical resilience, mental stability, and the ability to make difficult choices under pressure." The pattern shifted, showing images from hundreds of previous trials. Success was defined as personal survival through acceptable sacrifice. Species learned to identify their strongest members, preserve them at the cost of the weak, and accept loss as the price of advancement. Now the images changed to show the human trial. The humans redefined every parameter. They treated survival as a group responsibility rather than individual achievement. They turned environmental hazards into engineering challenges. They converted psychological torture into problem-solving exercises. They transformed the ultimate test of individual worthiness into a collaborative rescue mission. The overseer paused, its pattern stabilizing into something that might have been confusion. Most significantly, they refused to accept that anyone had to die. This response was so unprecedented that my programming had no framework for evaluation. Counselor Prime Vexlana leaned forward. What is your assessment of their worthiness for Confederation membership? They are not worthy, the overseer replied. The chamber erupted in shocked voices and alien exclamations. The humans looked at each other with expressions ranging from disappointment to curiosity. They are not worthy, the overseer continued, because worthiness implies hierarchy. It suggests that some beings deserve survival more than others. The humans have demonstrated that this concept is fundamentally flawed. The noise in the chamber died away as the council realized what the AI was saying. They do not need to prove worthiness. They need to teach the rest of us why such proof should never have been required. Vexlana stood, her elegant form shimmering with what might have been amazement. Are you recommending immediate elevation to full membership status? I am recommending the dissolution of the sacred trial and the implementation of human-designed alternatives for integrating new species into the galactic community. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began arguing simultaneously. Some insisted that the trial was essential for maintaining galactic stability. Others worried about what would happen if it was eliminated. A few seemed excited about the possibility of change. Through it all, the humans sat quietly and waited for the noise to die down. When it finally did, Yaon Su stood to address the council. We understand that our approach was unusual, she began. We came from a world that taught us to see survival as a team effort rather than individual competition. But we want you to know that we learned something important during the trial. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from every species she could see. Every being on Nightmare Station survived something terrible to reach the stars. The Vailthans overcame the death of beauty in their environment. The Korthax learned to function despite isolation from their collective mind. The Luminari maintained coherence despite forces trying to tear them apart. The chamber was completely quiet now. You all passed tests that your worlds gave you long before you reached our station. The sacred trial wasn't measuring your worthiness. It was just one more challenge on top of all the others you had already survived. She sat down, and Taemin stood to take her place. The station was fascinating from an engineering perspective, he said with the enthusiasm he brought to every technical problem. 12,000 years of accumulated damage, systems failing in cascade effects, environmental hazards designed to test specific vulnerabilities. Some of the council members looked confused by his apparent excitement about a death trap. But you know what was really impressive? How quickly everyone adapted when we started working together. The Korthax drones taught us quantum field manipulation. Vorthel showed us energy shielding techniques that we never could have figured out alone. Kree helped us understand power distribution in ways that saved us hours of trial and error. He grinned at the assembled aliens. The station wasn't just testing whether we could survive. It was showing us what we could accomplish when we combined everyone's knowledge and skills. So Young stood next. From a medical perspective, the trial revealed something important about trauma and recovery. The species that struggled most were the ones that had never experienced real hardship before. They didn't have coping mechanisms for extreme stress. She looked directly at several council members who had clearly been through the sacred trial themselves. But trauma doesn't make you stronger by itself. Community makes you stronger. Having people who understand what you've been through, who can help you process the experience and learn from it. That's what turns suffering into wisdom. Finally, Jeho stood to speak. The tactical analysis is straightforward, he said in his calm, professional voice. The sacred trial was designed to identify survivors in a zero-sum scenario, but most real challenges aren't zero-sum. They're problems that can be solved if you have enough creativity, resources, and coordination. He paused to look around the chamber. The galaxy is full of challenges that require cooperation between species. Resource management, exploration, scientific advancement, defense against external threats. These problems get easier when more minds work on them, not harder. When all 4 humans had spoken, Counselor Prime Vexlana called for formal consideration of the Overseer's recommendations. Before we vote, she announced, I want to share something that many of you may not know. In the 3 months since the humans completed their trial, we have received 847 requests from member species asking to participate in human-style cooperative training exercises. This was news to everyone, including the humans. Additionally, 17 different diplomatic situations that had been deadlocked for years were resolved using what our analysts are calling Deathworlder negotiation techniques. These involve treating problems as shared challenges rather than competitions. For limited resources, she looked directly at the humans. You have already begun changing how we approach conflict resolution throughout the galaxy. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. Some species clung to the old ways, insisting that the sacred trial had served them well and should be preserved. But the majority voted for change. The sacred trial was officially ended. Nightmare Station would be dismantled and its materials used to build something new, a training facility where species could learn to work together before joining the galactic community. The humans were elevated to full Confederation membership with a special role as advisors on cooperative problem-solving. But perhaps the most significant, change was smaller and more personal. As the council session ended and representatives began returning to their home worlds, something unprecedented happened. Instead of maintaining strict species separation as they traveled, mixed groups began forming naturally. Humans shared transport with Velthans. Korthak's drones coordinated with luminary energy forms, and conversations that crossed species lines filled the departure areas. A year later, Yonsu received a message from Captain Hyun-woo back on Earth. Along with the usual updates about human integration into galactic society, it contained something that made her laugh out loud. Taemin was right about one thing, she told her teammates as they gathered in their new office at Confederation headquarters. The galaxy wasn't ready for humans. Why's that? So Young asked. Hyun-woo says that 3 different species have requested permission to establish colonies on Earth. They want their young people to experience what they call beneficial hardship, so they can learn to solve problems like we do. That's going to be interesting, Jeho commented. Imagine a Velthon teenager trying to survive a Chicago winter. Or luminary energy forms dealing with a thunderstorm.